Just want to talk a little bit now about planter box mix. So in a normal general garden situation, like you can see in the foreground, normal gardening on ground or on grade, how it's described, you would use a general garden mix. Now in this case there's native, so it's got a native mix low P, so it's a native garden mix in there. If they weren't natives, you could have organic garden mix or premium garden mix or one of the general garden mixes. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got a container that would have a potting mix. Lightweight, free draining potting mix for something like this. In the middle of those two, you have raised planter boxes. Now in this case it's veggie patches, but the same applies. It could be a balcony or something like that. So it's not a container this small, and it's not a general garden mix product. So it's a compromise mix, which is a bit of a half and half between these two. So it needs to hold more water and have more body than a general potting mix, but not as much as a garden mix. So you have a planter box mix, which is what I've got here. Still free draining, but heavier than a normal potting mix, but nowhere near as dense as a general garden mix. This planter box here is about 800 high. Now when you get to that sort of height, you have to be a little bit careful with what you put to the full depth. So normally you would have a drainage layer at the bottom, which will be a river sand. And the idea is water goes through the planter box mix, goes down through to the bottom, gets to the drainage layer and drains away. At this depth though, you would also consider to have a middle layer, which is a sub-planter mix, which is a much less organic, much freer draining version of a planter box mix. So you would put in a planter box mix to about 400 deep, maybe slightly deeper, but about that depth. The next 300 or 400 would be what we call a sub-planter mix, and then beneath that you have a drainage layer. And the idea is you have the mix at top that the plant predominantly grows in and roots into, then you have a freer draining bit below it, so the water moves down into that next layer and into the bottom drainage layer. That's how you do a planter box installation. Now if that planter box was only 500 deep, only that deep, you wouldn't worry about a middle layer. You'd have planter box on top and a drainage layer of sand at the bottom of maybe 75 or 100 mil. So just keep in mind, it's not quite a potting mix, it's not a general garden mix, it's a planter box mix which is designed for large raised planters or very large pots.